For some reason, we thrive on the pain. And so why, Garrett, why in the world would you ever think I want to ride a bull this weekend?
Man, it's a good question. Well, I mean, there is a story behind that one. There's something that's appealing to challenging ourselves, to pushing the limits, to finding what our limits are. Because when you do that, you find that we're more capable than most of us are even aware of.
Welcome to the Range Podcast. I'm Ricky Bruley, and with me is Jake Hollywood Iverson. Join us at the Archery range, where we'll tell stories from the hunt, discuss technical bow shooting tactics and gear, and pick the brains of some of the most successful people to ever shoot a bow. Whether you're about to shoot that X for the win or send an arrow at a trophy buck, this podcast is for you. The Range Podcast is brought to you by Vapor Trail Archery, makers of the best bowstrings money can buy, originators of limb-driven arrow rest technology, and innovators of Stokerized stabilizer systems. Welcome to The Range, everybody. I'm your host, Ricky Bruley, and today you all have the pleasure of meeting a man who is partially responsible for my obsession with shooting a bow. What's unique about this episode is that we both grew up within probably less than a mile of one another, and here, some 30 years later, we're discussing our passions on the Range Podcast. He's a Minnesota native who now resides in Colorado. Garret Rock thrives on adventure, more often than not with the hope of flinging an arrow at a mountain-dwelling creature. To learn more about Garret, be sure to look him up on Facebook and on Instagram at Garret Rock 5. That's at Garret Rock and the number 5. Thank you all for joining us today. You can also find the video version of this episode on our Vapor Trail YouTube channel. So please head on over, subscribe, give us a like, and hit that bell so you can be up to date on all things archery. Don't forget to follow us at the Range Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, as well as Vapor Trail Archery and Stokerized Stabilizers on all of our social media channels. Hey, Garret, what's up, man? Thanks for gracing us with your presence today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Happy to reconnect.
Yeah, man.
Happy to have memories just flying through my head of where we grew up and family and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah,
this should be fun.
Real quick, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your family, your career, just kind of, whatever you want to talk about in regards to that.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern Minnesota, same hometown as you, Ricky, and found myself after grad school, I'm a chiropractor by trade, sports scientist as well, and now co-run a healthcare company that's in several states, but live in Colorado. Got to the mountains as quickly as I could. In 2006 was my first chance to move here. 2005, and got here, and right now we live in Steamboat Springs, which is mountain town, most famous or most well known for its skiing, and I don't know, just enjoying life here.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I honestly cannot believe I still live in Minnesota, for the record. I mean, not that I love it here, but just for as much as I love the mountains and.
Yeah, mine was. So my family used to do a road trip every year. These would be marathon road trips. You had all 4 kids crammed in the back seat of a station wagon, and gosh, we hit a lot of different areas of the U.S. But the Colorado one, I think I was 10, and it was, I mean, the first moment that I laid eyes on the mountains, there's no other direction in life for me. And after that, yeah, a couple of years ago, I got my hands on a bin of keepsakes that my parents had kept upstairs, and you look at all the drawings and stories and everything, in grade school through high school, everything that was some form of art or attempt at a form of art was just, mountains. So
yeah, and that's awesome. It's befitting too. You can tell, for anybody that heads over to your channels and kind of takes a look at the experiences that you've had, you can tell that you're in your element for sure.
Yeah, it's where I'm at my best. It's where creativity pours out of me, and where I can get easily sort of claustrophobic, I think, in tight settings, meaning cities, etc. And gosh, for career, for just work, being a father, husband, if I get my mountain time, all is well.
Yeah.
If I don't, then things start unraveling pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think my wife could attest to that too. She would probably agree that if I don't, she can tell when I need to get some time either in a tree or up in the boundary waters or something like that. So, just real quick, what is the origin story in regards to you becoming a bow hunter? I'm just curious about how that all started.
Yeah. My dad, I think I was 5 years old is what I remember. So my dad bought a bow for my uncle Lynn. You may remember, well, Adam,
Yeah.
the Hansons. And so my dad bought a bow from Lynn. They built some tree stands that probably weighed 90 pounds, were made out of straight just steel and wood. And um, and they had 4 kids. They were pretty young with 4 kids, and so for him to be able to hunt, he had to bring the boy out to the tree stand, I think. And so um, what I remember is the first hunt is there wasn't a tree stand for me. He was a big crotch of a tree, and he plopped me in there and said, "Don't move." And it was either that hunt or another one when he shot his first whitetail, and it was just a little button buck. And there was something about that experience that just sucked me in. And so after that, if you look, my history, my 4-H project the next year was how to shoot a bow. Probably the only person in history of 4-H to get a white ribbon. Typically, it's like a slap in the face.
Oh no!
It was such a bad project, but I was proud of it. And after that, that was just, I don't know, bow hunting just became the thing that I think about way too much. Can't get off my mind, and it's a distraction from everything that people would call meaningful living to me.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you can probably relate.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I'm just going to jump right in and kind of, I want to tell this story, about how this conversation came to be. And Garret, feel free to interject at any point if you want. But so, as you said before, we grew up in the same little town of Crookston, Minnesota, surrounded by nothing but cornfields and beets, right? Like, the beet plant was there, and every once in a while it would give off an odoriferous mist across the city where, you'd catch a whiff of it every once in a while. That was always nice. And I think we probably had some mutual friends. I believe you were a class ahead of me, right? Were you 97?
97, yeah.
97, yeah, and I was 98. We had looking back on it, I'm just like, we had different social circles, and it's just funny because I feel like we could have been like best friends in high school, right? Just because of what our background is now and what we love to do.
Yeah.
But, and you probably know too that I'm also really good buddies with your cousins, Aaron and Anthony Munn.
Yeah.
Over the years, Aaron would always tell me, he'd say, oh man, you should really reach out to Garret. You guys have a lot of the same interests. And I always had good intentions, and then, life takes over, and that's just kind of how it goes. But so I want to go back to 1996 when I bought my first bow. I've talked about this a little bit on some previous podcasts. But I can't remember if it was either Aaron or Anthony. I don't recall how it is that I came to find out that your dad was selling that bow. But I very distinctly remember walking up to the door, knocking on the front door, and your dad just had this glowing bow in his hand. It was just, the angels came out, and the sun was shining directly on the bow. It was the only thing I could see. And I don't even remember if I really looked at it in detail much, like not the way that I would now, before buying a bow. But I just remember handing him the cash and just instantly hightailing it home and immediately starting to fling some arrows. I just jammed some cardboard into a box and started shooting immediately. And so that's kind of where that all kind of took off for me. I've been hooked ever since. And it turns out that when you and I started talking, I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out that bow used to be yours, which, hopefully I can get that senior photo from you where you've got the bow there out in front of you. That'd be fun to show all of our viewers the photo of that.
That's your bow.
Oh my gosh. You might have to
Is
send
that,
that to me.
is that
Oh
a terrible
no.
photo?
Oh man. In all fairness, if you let me show that one, I'll show my senior photos because
All right.
mine will make you look good. Mine are so bad. I had I was a skateboarder, so I had, spiky hair and all gelled up and stuff, and the gal that was taking the photos started brushing it out. And I didn't really
Oh
notice
no.
what she was doing. I was just like, hey, okay, you're the expert, I want to look good for these photos, right? And I had a beehive, man. I'm not even kidding. I had a beehive on top of my head. It's awful. But, and I've actually got the bow sitting right here too. In the studio, I probably can't get wide enough here to see it, but PSE
There it is.
PSE Polaris. I'm not exactly sure what year it is. Maybe I don't know, but
No. All I remember is I saved up for that thing. That was my first bow that I bought for myself and shot. Gosh, well, that wasn't my first year, but yeah, no, that bow meant everything to me. Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
my start too.
Yeah, just the story. I'm like, this is a story that has to be told, so really, I guess, kind of how it came about too is, so now we're like 30 years later, and we, our social circles kind of intertwined because we're both into hunting and all of that. And one day, I was just scrolling through Instagram, I think, and I saw that Sitka Gear had posted one of Bianca Germain's photos on their story. And I'm like, man, that guy looks kind of familiar, but I thought, what are the chances, Didn't think much of it, just kind of kept going. And then I don't know if it was a day or, that same day or a day later or something, and I was on Facebook now, and I had seen that you had posted the same photo on your story. And I was like, no way, so immediately I responded, or I sent you a message on that story and had kind of, said something about how I bought my first bow from your dad. And now here I am still in the archery industry. And then that's how the conversation kind of started to go. And so now here we are, we're having a conversation on the Range podcast. We're talking about archery and our outdoor passion. So,
Yeah. What came to mind was when you sent the photo of the bow was it's like that Frosty the Snowman song. There must have been some magic in that old silk hat.
yep.
Whatever this bow is, it instills such a passion that it influences your life. So
Yeah.
be careful touching that Polaris bow, friends of Ricky.
Yeah. Yeah, whoever gets it, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe my daughter will shoot it or something, but it'll be hard for me to part with it. It's just funny how I've gone through so many bows since then. 24 at least, and it's the one that I'll always hang on to. And I like what a lot of people do with their older bows is they kind of convert them over to like a bow fishing rig or something like that. And so I did just that, and I was bow fishing with it for a while. I'll put some photos up of some carp that I shot with it. But yeah, just an amazing. I just think it's so cool that just that inanimate object, you know what I mean? Just what it can do and how it can, kind of develop relationships and all that kind of stuff. So really, really cool.
Yeah, it's probably harmed my relationship with my dad now. I think he pocketed that money.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question that I was going to ask you, actually, if you ever had a chance to talk to him about that.
I asked him if he remembered, and he really didn't. So
yeah, oh shoot, I don't remember all the bows I sold, but I think most people remember the first one they bought, right? So
yeah.
so I can understand
sure.
that. So, but yeah, so folks, if you were to go check out Garrett's Instagram and Facebook pages, you'll see that he thrives on unique experiences that really test, the homeostasis of the human body, so to speak. And most people, I think they see the beautiful views, but they don't often understand the pains of getting there. And I have this conversation often with a lot of people, but I want to get your take on embracing the suck, basically, because for some reason, we thrive on the pain. And so why, Garret, why in the world would you ever think, I want to ride a bull this weekend? We'll be right back.
Hollywood here. New for the 2023 archery season is our brand new online arrow customizer.
Build your Victory or Easton arrows with multiple vane options, configurations, and custom arrow wraps in a large array of designs and colors. Spine indexing and expedited build options are also available, so you can get back out in the field and fling it in style. Check out the Vapor Trail Arrow Customizer at www.vaportrailarchery.com/arrow customizer.
Man, it's a good question. Well, I mean, there is a story behind that one. There's something that's appealing to challenging ourselves, to pushing the limits, to finding what our limits are. Because when you do that, you find that we're more capable than most of us are even aware of. And I found that true in my own life, that it's really empowering for me, number one. Number two, I'm just pretty high on the introverted spectrum, and I have to have that alone time. That's where, the ideas come out that, have driven my career. But the bull one is funny because, so for some years, I can't remember how old I was when I did it, maybe 36, 37. And I'd had these comfortable years, career was getting comfortable, and I just hadn't faced fear in a while. And that's almost scary to me if I don't, face some sort of fear, that it feels like I'm going backwards in life. And so I was thinking, what's on my bucket list? I'm kind of a bucket list person, and what's on there that I haven't done that just will scare the living, out of me. And bull riding was still on my yellow piece of paper. And so I did a bull riding camp. And I don't know, for those of you that haven't done it, if you want to feel fear, I'm not sure that I've ever felt fear like that in my life. It's like the sort of fear that makes you black out in the middle of the process. And but it also, I mean, you come out of it a stronger person. I mean, injured, hurting, but it's just what a cool experience. So yeah, I don't know what drives it. I mean, part of it is that just wanting to find out what the limits are. Part of it is there's just always been something that appeals to me that in sort of physical endeavors, and maybe it's because I often say I feel like I'm mentally obese, and I have to really like dive into work for a few days, which happens all the time. I come out of it just feeling like a really out of shape person that just walked up, the Eiffel Tower stairs or something. I think it's really exhausting to me, but so where I can find some sort of satisfaction or reward to an effort is not in the thinking related activities, but in the physical. So yeah.
Yeah, well said. And I love that the thought of, or the saying where you feel mentally obese, right? Like it, because I get that, it's a little bit different paths, I mean, as far as our careers go, but with me and being tethered to technology all the time with my career and all that, it gets to be exhausting sometimes, and especially with the kids, they really love the devices, right? And so kind of trying to balance things out and trying to get outside and do some of that stuff. And so yeah, I hear that. That's because of that. I often, the last couple of years I've spent a week solo up in the Boundary Waters, and it's just so amazing. And sometimes it's almost the silence can sometimes even be deafening, because you're just like, this is like, holy man, it's amazing. It's incredible. And those experiences, you come back a different person too,
To that note, in Alaska, I've done quite a few trips to Alaska, most of them for hunting, but backcountry skiing as well. They're really cool boat-based backcountry ski trip up there. And you get out there, you get dropped off, and I'm sure many of your listeners have been up there. And the way the first 2 days have gone for me every year is I feel like I'm hearing ATVs all around me. And I've got a good friend who lives up there, and every time I mention it, his response is, "That's impossible. You're crazy." And then after about 48 hours, that noise disappears, and you realize that that's just like, it's what we're accustomed to, is this ambient noise of busyness, of things, of engines, of people. And then you experience true silence, and it's a pretty rewarding and freeing experience. I mean, and to see where your mind goes. You think, oh, when I'm up there, I've got things for work that I need to think about and solve for. You get in that silence, and nothing matters other than what's happening at the moment. And that's a pretty cool feeling.
Definitely. And I can honestly say that some of my greatest ideas or, motivations have come from just having the ability to kind of turn it off and just think without distraction, And so, yeah, I would say a lot of, just a lot of the progress I think in my life comes from that, because it just helps you have that kind of aha moment, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to get into your bighorn sheep hunt that you did during the pandemic. And I saw that back in 2021, you wrote a great storyteller piece about your Colorado bighorn sheep hunt titled "There Is Nothing I'd Rather Be Doing." And you couldn't have said it better. And, that would certainly ring true for me as well if my daughter hadn't been born in August of that same year. But you quoted Jack O'Connor, and I wanted to read this for context, because it just kind of floored me. I hadn't heard this one before, and he said, "A sportsman may have hunted deer, turkey, elk, and bears for years with the greatest of success, but until he has taken his sheep, until he has matched his brains, his endurance, and his skills with those inhabitants of the Rocky Peaks, he is still but a sophomore." And I was like, whoa, okay. Because at this age, I had all but basically given up on the likelihood that I would ever hunt sheep until I read that quote. And even having conversations with Jason Madsinger and, just all of that kind of stuff, I'm just like, man, that would be really cool, but it's never going to happen, And so, it's just like, how can someone spend all this time and effort into honing the skill set and then, go out a sophomore, right? I can't do that, So then I went down this rabbit hole and immediately began to research what I need to start doing to go on an adventure like that. So I'm curious, because the application process can be really confusing, and especially for non-residents. So how does the application process work for bighorn sheep in Colorado, and how many points did you have before you drew the coveted tag that you got?
Yeah, so the application is, you've got what are called weighted points, and then you have, you're in a lottery. And so in Colorado, you have to get to 3 points, and then, you start to hit, basically points that are weighted. And you can draw at any point in there, I believe. It's been a while since I reviewed this, but, for sheep, general rule of thumb is it's going to take a long time. Mm-hmm. But there are some things that you can do to reduce that time. And I was somebody who benefited from, having an idea of what those things are. And those things are, you can be willing to embrace the suck. I mean, that's what it is. And so, you have units where they're accessible. You can be glassing sheep from the road and shoot one from not far from the road. And then you have units that are later in the season that are, like where I was deep in the San Juan Mountains, second sheep season. I mean, you have to be pretty mountain competent, or confident, maybe. Not, I mean, yeah, feel like you're competent. To be willing to grab that tag, especially if this is going to be a once or, at most twice in a lifetime thing. And so for me, I mean, fitness is huge. I spend my life in the mountains. And I've spent, many, 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 many nights in some pretty bad situations in the mountains. And so I'm comfortable taking the risk of having a tag in which, there could be some serious discomfort. The other thing that with the San Juans, they're super remote. And so you're going to put some miles, and I try to remember what our total elevation gain on that hunt was, but over 12 days, it was absurd. I mean, the physical effort was real. And, I came back pretty skinny fella, and I'm not skinny anyway, but yeah, so drawing the tag, I drew it in 7 years because what we had was a run of some bad weather during that season, people running into bad luck. And this is how I got a mountain goat tag in 5 years is there was a unit where nobody had shot a late season mountain goat in like 2 years, I believe it was. And so nobody's putting in for that tag because, nobody's having success. And if you're just looking at the spreadsheets as somebody who doesn't kind of understand the behavior of people, and that's my job in healthcare. My job is to study human behavior, and how I've applied it to hunting is where is everybody looking? And then if you're fit and willing to go through the suck, what can I do to increase my odds of drawing? And so, I drew sheep with 7, drew mountain goat with 5 by just going into the zones and in the seasons where, it could really not be fun. And, but then again, it's always fun. It's, there's no place I'd rather be. And I said that.
So I encourage folks to go over and read that piece. It's a wonderful story. Photos were all, I believe, taken by Bianca Germain, correct?
Yeah.
And she's an amazing photographer. We've been trying to see if I can't get her on the podcast. But going back to your hunt out there, as I was reading, and again, there's something that draws me to the struggles, because it was a tough hunt for you out there, and anybody, I imagine, and as I was kind of doing my research, they're saying that, archery tags are more readily available than rifle tags. You have a greater chance of getting one. I thought I read that there's a little over 300 bighorn sheep tags awarded each year, and I think maybe 10% of those go to non-residents. And if I remember the odds, it was somewhere around like 1 in 1,800 or something like that. So again, but they say that you can't get it if you don't apply. So, right now I've been applying for points in Colorado for the last couple of years, but I've never grabbed the bighorn application because it's $100. But I might need to start doing that now because, because I basically just go in and I buy my small game license, because you first have to have some sort of hunting license before you can apply. And then after that, I think it's like $9 or $10 per species. So then I just apply for all of them, except for the ones that are $100 each.
Yeah. There's the sheep nuts will say a sheep hunt will do one of two things. It'll make you never want to set foot in those mountains again, or it's going to suck you in. And for me, I didn't realize just what a spectacular and amazing life experience a sheep hunt could be and would be until I had one. And so that $100, if you draw, is worth it, and if you don't, now my tune has changed. It's worth a try. Mm-hmm. It's worth the effort.
Yeah, and if anything, it goes, the money goes back into conservation, right? So, So I imagine based on what you just said, you'd definitely do it again. I imagine you're applying to go again.
Oh, that's all I think about now is how do I get to Alaska for dull and this place and uh, for stone and desert and yeah, no, I about once a month I look online and see if anybody's giving away a tag for free or a little less money. But
Yeah.
if I went and spent the amount that it costs, I'm pretty sure my wife would have something to say about it.
Right. Those are some expensive steaks that are going to be on the table, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like so drawn to it now, and I'm like, man, I'm kind of bummed out that I hadn't, kind of taken the plunge earlier on. But I'll start throwing in there and see what happens. But and good job too. Congrats on having success as well. It just, again, with the story and how it goes, it's if it would have been easy, the story wouldn't be as intriguing either. You know what I mean? And we've talked about that a lot with some of our other guests. Is it's just I've had opportunities like day 1, day 2 on a hunt, and I filled my mule deer tag one year in South Dakota on like the second day, and luckily I was out there with a buddy, and so he had a tag too, and so we got to spend the remainder of the time we were out there helping him get one, which is fun too. It's fun to be able to run around in the woods and not have to carry your bow with you everywhere you're going, and film and take pictures and do all that stuff. So that even just being out there is amazing. But still, so much of the story is in the struggle and the things that you have to deal with and go through in order to have success, right? And success is different for everybody, right? So even if you hadn't filled that tag, most likely still probably a success in losing weight anyway, right?
Yeah, that hunt had there's just stories within stories in that experience, and probably one of the more interesting ones is Bianca Germain. So she had been doing a lot of photography in the backcountry skiing world and some of the other outdoor, environments. But the year before, she had won Sitka's their photo contest,
Diverge.
and Diverge, yeah, and so they basically said, all right, you get a hunt, go do a hunt, shoot it, and then that's kind of a tryout. And this was the hunt that she chose. I knew her from the backcountry skiing world and
Sure.
mutual friend, and I think it was day 3, 4. We had been in some gorgeous country, put in some big physical efforts. She had amazing photos in her camera, went launching down the mountain, and everything just blew up, and SD card disappeared. And I mean, the SD card to find it in the middle of a mountain that had then been sliding, was impossible. But I found it, and somehow, some way, and it's a crazy story. It'd be too long to share how I found it, but it drills down to where it's like all the rocks converge down, and we're just sliding, and I was just sliding my hand through there, and the rocks would slide down, and this thing somehow surfaced up. And now she's one of the most prominent photographers in hunting. And had she not passed that tryout, you never know. She's a fighter. She would have found her way through. But
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun story within a story.
That's really cool. I do remember reading. I feel like she had posted something not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, about it. I thought I had read about it, but I didn't realize that it was on this same hunt. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah, and as a hunter, I was just, are we going to spend time, dealing with the camera? Like, I've got a sheep to go find,
Yeah.
And so, but pay attention to karma always. And that's why I remember it being like, ooh, this is my test, right? The world saying, are you going to be selfish, or are you going to work for the greater good here? And it all paid off in the end.
You had opened up the article talking about, just it being a strange time with COVID and all of that kind of stuff. And, in the archery world here too, as far as like manufacturing, I've been with Vapor Trail for probably 15 years up to that point. And we always thrived on and took pride in the fact that we were probably the fastest producer of bowstrings in the industry. And it wasn't just half the year, it was year round. We had a 3-day guarantee, and rarely would we even get past 2 days when we would ship. And that year was the first year that we went beyond 3 days. And it wasn't just 3 days. At some point, I believe we were over 20 days behind. And, again, just so many people being cooped up, not able to do the things that they normally do, and just getting into more outdoors type sports. And, I know like shooting sports and archery just exploded. It just went nuts. And so we got inundated with orders. And so you had made mention about the trailheads. And so, I feel like I can speak for us both in that we, take pride in having the skills and the gear to go, deep in for multiple days on end, to go on these life-altering adventures with some truly amazing people. But, how hard was it to see the masses of people at the trailheads during that time?
How do you be PC here? It's, when you're somebody who just wants to get away and experience some freedom, and, you show up anywhere and it just felt like there were people all over. And I don't often follow the trails, but still is like, in that area, that's an area that just notoriously is quiet and remote. And you'd get out on these ridges and you'd look around and there's just people around. It was crazy. And so it really affected that hunt in a big way, where the sheep typically were. And I have a good friend down there, and he knows all those sheep pretty well for that area, and the sheep behaviors, and they just weren't where they should be. They were in, what we were calling hellholes and caves, and the worst, least accessible places that you can imagine. And that was just assumingly influenced by the people. But even we had a cabin at that time up by Fairplay, Colorado, which is a pretty quiet area. And there's these trailheads where you take your dog or kid, go for a jog, and that you never saw anybody at, and you were parking a half mile away from the trailhead. I mean, it was that significant out here, and I'm not being dramatic. I remember taking my daughter, she was 3 at the time, to do a 14er, and of course she's on the back for most of it. But we had to park 2 miles away from the trailhead.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nuts. But yeah, I mean, I guess the more optimistic or maybe less pessimistic person would say, look how many people got out to enjoy the outdoors. But I didn't love it, I can tell you that.
Yeah, right.
You asked me how I felt.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, and again, I've come to find out too, just like you, that I'm introverted, and having to get out and get away. Guys like us can probably, we can get way out there, further than probably most people would want to, just simply because of the dangers of it if you're not skilled enough or anything like that. But did you see like an increase of maybe hunters way back in some of those areas where you normally wouldn't see anyone?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so what pops to mind is this vision of this person walking on a ridge that is back in an area where I've elk hunted for years, and just an amazing area. And I've never seen anybody, had never seen a soul back there in, probably 7 years of hunting that area, because it's just terrible to get to. Out here in Colorado, a lot of ultra runners, and it was the fit crowd that seemed to get, sucked into this idea of archery hunting during that time. And so there were just, they can get back there too. They're my friends. I have my friends that were just ultra runners before, now are archery hunters, and And so it just, areas where the elk were going to get away because they just didn't expect to see a human. Now you had more people that were back there, and then just less experienced hunters. And so, making mistakes like, ridge lining, right at peak hours and such. And so it did seem to it influenced the animals, from what I saw, from what I've heard. And, it influenced my experience hunting, for sure. I was just used to not having to compete with certain areas.
Yeah, and it's so on that hunt. I mean, it seems like there was so much stacked against you. You had the wildfires, so you had smoke from that. You had,
Yeah.
like you said, the sheep were a lot more skittish. I found it interesting what you had said in here about how they're more concerned about like human traffic than most other things, and so
Yeah.
that's obviously the fact that you guys had to get deeper in there. And your buddy who, says he had been hunting sheep for the better part of 20 years. And it was the worst he'd ever seen. So the odds were most certainly stacked against you, and you still made it happen. And it's funny because I was, going through, your Facebook. I was looking at that post you did, where you rode the bull, and a lot of people had commented, and they were calling you Doc. And so, up until this very episode, I wasn't 100% certain what your career path was. And so I wasn't sure if they were calling you that because, you graduated from being a sophomore in hunting to having a PhD in hunting after this hunt, or, and now I come to realize it's probably more likely because of your profession, but.
Yeah. Nobody would give me that amount of credit in the hunting world, I don't think. Competitive environment.
Yeah, and to go back to that too, I think it's so cool that you did that with the bull. I didn't. That's wild. And I don't know. I do some crazy stuff where, well, maybe I shouldn't call it crazy, but there's just things that other people say, man, you're nuts for doing something like that. But I don't think any of that equates to getting on a bull. And I think you did it like you rode 4 times, didn't you?
Yeah, they did a weekend camp, and it's for people that want to make a career out of it. But I was a fantasy camper, and we got on like 4 bulls that weekend, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it's accessible. Like you can sign up, you can do it tomorrow, Ricky, and you're just gonna get yelled at a lot by the coaches. They're not. You don't get to be soft in that environment. You don't get to pause when they say get on that, bleeping bull.
Oh yeah.
You get on the bull, and when they open the chute, they're not concerned about your safety. They're more concerned about the bull's safety because that bull's got a brighter future in that arena than I did. So
I suppose. Oh, that's funny.
So it's just, I mean, it's good for a person to be, humbled.
Right.
And that was a good humbling experience. Face fears, personal growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it, man.
And a side story to that, the reason I chose that year was our daughter was going to be born in the next month. And so we were meeting our insurance deductible. And so I figured there's no better time, don't have a 5,000 deductible anymore. And
yeah,
you get hurt and it's covered.
Yeah.
So.
Perfect. That's how you just time it perfect. That's all you got to do. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so cool. Real quick too, one thing that I started to do, and because we've got a lot of people that follow us that are target shooters, and so if they're interested in getting into bow hunting, or if they're something like that, I'm just curious, what is your best piece of advice that you have in regards to bow hunting?
Yeah, I drift 2 directions. One is just the bow hunting experience. Bow hunting's tough. And, I'm a Western hunter. And so, this is spot and stock. Animals are on the move. And, for example, like the bull I shot this year, the elk, it took 6 days, and the number of miles that I had to cover to finally get on this particular bull that had 47 cows with him.
Jeez.
You know, it was a lot. And so as far as the bow hunting experience, like the you know, personal advice would be get fit, get good gear, and become competent in the outdoors. That doesn't mean you have to go in the mountains, but it means that, you know, you have to know what to do when a rainstorm or a thunderstorm comes in, when it snows, when you thought it was going to be 60 degrees, or when it's 6 degrees during the day and then at night drops down to 10. And you know, and so those are those three things. As far as archery, you know, it's just, I think of with the products like, you know, Vapor Trail that you guys make, you know, and the bows nowadays, I mean, compared to that PSC Polaris, you know, I think probably maxed out at about 30 yards and, you know, shooting, yeah, well, that 60, 70 yards is completely reasonable, but you got to shoot. You got to put the time in and do it all year long. And then things like bow tuning. I mean, tuning to broadheads. I mean, that's get dialed in and just shoot. You know, and that's what I do. It's meditation for those of us that can't actually meditate. Like go out and shoot, and it's a pretty fun thing to do. So that'd be it. And I know that that's soft advice, but you know, pretty vague and catch all, but it matters, you know. Get out there, and then you're going to fine tune, you know, what works for you, because it's such an individualized, you know, sport. There are technique, you know, principles, but you know, like how I look when I draw a bow back might look a little different than you, but if you shoot enough, you drift into techniques that just, you know, match your movements and such. So I don't know, that's what comes to mind.
No, that's great advice. And you know, I've probably spent half of my bow hunting career doing you know, metro hunts, and I coordinated some for a while, and it got to a point where, you know, because we get a lot of new hunters that come in because they don't have a lot of opportunity. They don't have land that they can go hunt, and public land in Minnesota is really tough to hunt, just because it's so overpopulated. And so, you know, this creates opportunities, you know, for hunters, and it's amazing how, you know, I think the YouTube world, you know, it's good, but then at the same time with some specialized things, it can really be not a good thing. And so I've seen some interesting things where, you know, we started to actually do broadhead proficiency testing. So with these hunts, we always have them, you know, they have to pass a proficiency test. They have to get so many arrows within a, you know, 5 or 8 inch circle, depending on how close in proximity they are to, you know, structures and stuff. And so we started actually doing broadhead testing as well, just because we would have a lot of wounded deer that we would be tracking. And the plus of that is we all, as coordinators, got really good at tracking deer. So that's a good thing. But at the same time, it was astonishing to me how many people didn't realize that you have to practice with your broadheads, because your point of impact, not always necessarily going to change, but often it does. And we would have, I would say, typically, you know, 20 to 30% of the shooters in that test would fail. And, you know, we'd give them an opportunity to come back and try it again. But again, that probably equated to how many wounded deer we would have too, you know? So it's great advice to me, and what you're saying about, you know, making sure you're practicing with your broadheads, and not only that, but just practicing. I mean, even some of these guys, they would, there's something about it, even when you're shooting in front of a group of guys and you have to take a test, even for me, like my heart rate starts to go up a little bit. I start getting a little bit nervous, you know, and that's what we want, because shooting in your backyard is not the same as when that animal gets in front of you. It's a totally different ball game, you know, and maybe you can relate, but I would say, you know, most of the time after I've let that arrow go towards an animal, if I wasn't in the moment and had the opportunity to think back on my process, I don't think I'd remember I don't know if I'm not sure if I even did I look through my peep? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
Because you're relying so much on, your muscle memory and from the shooting and everything, which that's good, but again, there's been a few situations where I've had that moment where you're like, okay, I got plenty of time here. I don't need to rush this, and you get an opportunity to kind of calm the nerves and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't downplay that at all. I think that's great advice. I wouldn't say it's soft, because there's a lot of new hunters out there that don't know stuff like that.
Well, to go on that, it's, in the West, your shot, you might get a split second. I mean, that's, again, like the bull this year, like literally had from seeing it to getting an arrow out at 58 yards, like probably 6 seconds, and so when I think about practice, the more you shoot, the more you're prepared for those circumstances. Whereas, we like to envision this. I'm going to pull up the range finder and dial my sight and do this, that, like, when you're mountain hunting and, and these animals are running all over the place, or not running, but walking, they're just never sitting still. It's hard to predict. It's not like I grew up whitetail hunting, and I used to stick a stick out there at 20 yards and, put some doe and heat on there, and, you hope that the buck just comes right there. And,
Yeah.
But even as a kid, one of the games I would play in the back of the Munn's backyard, me and Anthony, is we'd take our arrows, stand at the target, and just chuck them all over the place. Wherever they landed, you had to shoot from. And so you had to get used to, estimating the yardage and all that. So, yeah, when I think of practicing, it's not just going in controlled situation. It's like practice rushing a shot, practice, throwing an arrow out and wherever it lands, shooting from. And yeah.
Did you hunt with Anthony in Crookston? Did you guys hunt together?
Yeah. We used to hunt at the convent all the time. We'd ride our bike there with our bows hanging and ride through town. Yeah.
That's cool. I was just going to ask if you had hunted back there with him, because he had mentioned that. And
yeah, he was so passionate about it. Yeah, we spent a lot of hours riding our bikes to the woods, and then he had his tree stand that he had set up one area, I had mine in another area, and just meet up after dark and ride home. Their house was the first house I went to after I shot my first deer. Went straight to their house and went to grab Anthony.
So, because I think he said that he got one when he was out there too once, I think, or is that right?
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Thanks again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk with you. And, it's so funny too, because it's one of the things that I really love about this podcast the most, is that sometimes it's hard to find time to make those phone calls and have these types of conversations. And that's what I love about the podcast, because it's like, it gives me this opportunity to have these conversations with people, and they always end up being so much more meaningful than I intended. So thank you for, sharing your story and sharing everything about, what you're up to and what you have going on. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate just this experience. I mean, we just touched on, areas of life that just would have gone by without me reliving them. And it's funny. We've been one person removed. I've done a bunch of hunts for Sitka and last year Matthews, Hoyt, some other companies, and then you start to look, and Ricky's always just one person away from the folks that I've met through some of those experiences. So it's good to connect here.
Yeah. For sure. Well, thanks again. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode. You can find us at the Range Podcast on Instagram and on Facebook. Also, be sure to head over to the Vapor Trail and Stokerized social channels. Give us a follow over there. Again, please be sure to head to our Vapor Trail YouTube channel. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe so you can be up to date on all things archery. And if you're listening, do me a huge favor. get over to iTunes or over to Spotify and make sure that you give us 5 stars. Also, don't forget, be sure to head over to Garrett's social media channels. He's Garret Rock 5 on Instagram, and then just Garret Rock on Facebook. Get over there, check him out, give him some love. And with that, we are going to pack up our bows and we're going to hit the range. Have a great day, everybody. Vapor Trail is now offering an exclusive discount to the Range Podcast listeners. Enter promo code TRP15, that's TRP15, at checkout for 15% off VTX bowstrings and Vapor Trail and Stokerized branded t-shirts, hats, and other gear.